Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Cody the Coin Raptor, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the historically depressed market for Bitcoin right now, specifically the perpetual futures market. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about my plan to weather the storm right now for Bitcoin. But before we get to that, be sure to subscribe, be sure to hit that like button, and be sure to follow me on Threads and also on X as well. So, Bitcoin has had a relatively sleepy weekend. It's a holiday weekend, it's very low volume. We're actually starting to see the price kind of move around just a little bit today, down about 2.24% in the last 24 hours. Now, Bitcoin has been depressed recently. The price has been depressed. There's been a lot of things going against Bitcoin, even though there's been also some good news, like Grayscale winning the lawsuit against the SEC, and the SEC being forcing the SEC to revisit the Bitcoin spot ETF application. But there's also been some near-term challenges, and one of those near-term challenges we can see here is actually the dollar index. The dollar index measures the strength of the dollar, okay, and we're actually starting to notice that it's based on the TA here, that it's actually starting to break out from this downtrend. Now, this downtrend was all the way starting back in here about November or so, and we're starting to see it actually break it out of the downtrend, and we're starting to see the it basically move higher. And so the reason why this is problematic for Bitcoin is because Bitcoin tends to share an inverse relationship with the strength of the dollar. So as the dollar gets stronger, Bitcoin gets weaker. As the dollar strength decreases, Bitcoin tends to increase in price. Now, that being said, even though the dollar is breaking out from this near-term downtrend, it's actually still in kind of more of a longer-term downtrend. We can see here that it kind of peaked back in September at 114, and now it's down at about 104. And so I've outlined the next major level of resistance here, which is going to be at about 105 or so. We're going to have to check and see where the strength of the dollar is after that point. And if I remove some of the stuff here, you can kind of see it a little bit better. But what it comes down to is the fact that the dollar is strengthening partially on the back of the Fed, which has continued the their rate hike and increasing the interest rates and the Fed funding rate. So we'll see what happens here with the dollar index. But one thing you'll notice is back in let's say about the 14th or so of July, it actually began the start of this monster run up here. And we can actually almost overlay that with the Bitcoin price. And we can see that back in July, the Bitcoin was near its highs right here at about 31,000, and since has tapered off significantly. So speaking of our Bitcoin price, if you take a look at one of my favorite recent indicators, which is the Bitcoin Bullish percent index, we're actually sitting at about a 5 or a 6 right now, which means that we're heavily oversold, and we're basically in more of a neutral kind of sideways crab-like market. And it really seems as though Bitcoin is kind of fallen asleep, right? We haven't really seen a lot of action. There hasn't been a lot of price movement since the news of the Grayscale winning the Bitcoin spot ETF appeal. And we saw that after that point, we saw actually a fairly large increase in the Bitcoin price, but then it was also followed by the SEC deciding to delay the approval of Bitcoin spot ETFs. And so we saw it immediately sell off. So we had a little bit of a news spike, kind of a fake out there, and then the SEC came in and drove the price back down again. And that just kind of shows you how depressed this market is right now, where not even good news can actually get Bitcoin to kind of move up significantly. But if we take a look at our Bitcoin futures TA, we can actually see something a little bit more extreme. Okay, so we all know this is the daily for the Bitcoin futures, and it's important to look at the futures market because the futures market gives you an idea of the total sentiment of what's going on, especially with traders and the Bitcoin price. What we're seeing right now is after that massive liquidation event back in the 17th of August, which, by the way, was about $386 million worth of long liquidations, And if you go and you compare it to previous long liquidation events, you have to go all the way back in June to see anything close to what we saw in that liquidation. The one in June was about 343 million. Now, if you guys remember, the June liquidation from 2022, which is what I'm talking about right here, was back when we had the collapse of Celsius and Terra Luna, and so that had a massive impact on the Bitcoin price as well. And we saw significantly higher long liquidations. And we also saw as well incredibly low open interest. So the number of contracts that are being opened. So open interest right now is basically at the same level as that June liquidation, which was an absolutely historic liquidation in the crypto industry and specifically for Bitcoin. And now we're starting to see a similar kind of event sort of play out. So the way this kind of works usually is that we eventually kind of bottom out in the open interest, and then after that we start to see some gradual returns to the people opening contracts, traders showing up, either taking long or short positions. And so far, we haven't seen that just yet. We're still remaining at historic levels of depression for your contracts and your traders. Now, it really seems like all the bulls have just left the market when it comes to your perpetual futures, because they really don't want any part of what's going on right now. And it's not surprising when you consider the fact that they mostly got wiped out back in that liquidation event we talked about here in the 17th of August. But it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, before the market heals again. And there's been a lot of these leveraged longs that have already been taken out of the market. In fact, if we take a look at our Decent Trader, the Bitcoin liquidity map, what you're seeing here is on the left side, that blue and that green are your long liquidity levels. And what we're seeing so far is that below 25K, we're actually having a fairly significant number of long liquidity right here in this area, from about 25,000 all the way down to 24,000. And then an even larger spike here at about 22 or so, 22,600, this huge level right here. So if we ever got anywhere close to that, it is entirely possible we'll wind up seeing even more liquidations, even more selling going on for the Bitcoin price. And that just kind of highlights how far we've moved basically in the past couple of months, where we were actually very close to the short liquidation levels at about 31,000 here, this huge short liquidity pool. And now we've kind of gone the other way, where we're saying, okay, well, anywhere below 23K, we're going to see some pretty massive long liquidations. So that's kind of where we are right now. The state of the Bitcoin market, everything is extremely depressed at the moment. We're still in a fear environment as per the Fear and Greed Index, and we're at kind of historic levels of low volatility, because the number of contracts out there are basically back in June of 2022 levels. Now, what I've been doing lately is I've actually made another Bitcoin buy back on Friday at 25,447. I'm actually kind of looking at all this as more of a contrarian indicator, because I like to be a contrarian. I like to buy for the long term instead of just for the short term. And these traders are mostly concerned with what's going on in the short term. Now, in the short term, we could definitely wind up seeing more pain. It's definitely possible, especially as the talk and the rhetoric of a recession continue. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But right now, I'm using this as more of a contrarian indicator, as the fact that the market is extremely depressed, and as a result, we're able to get Bitcoin at about $25,800. Now, back when I did that buy, I get about 25,000, almost 447, which is really good. I actually really like that level, and if potentially if I could buy below that level, I definitely will be. So I'll continue to add to my position, to continue to DCA, as long as the market remains depressed. And as soon as the market switches and goes back to euphoria, I am back to being on the sidelines. And as a result, the long term, I'm going to be averaging down at excellent Bitcoin prices, especially around here at about 25,400. Now, as for what's been going on with miners, I think it's really important to point out that if we take a look at our hash price index, which is basically, you can kind of think of it like how much miners are earning right now. Our hash price index is showing us that hash prices are fairly low right now. I mean, let me switch this over to terahashes. But if you can actually see at the top here, miners were essentially earning about almost 8 cents or so per terahash per day. Now what they're at is about 5 cents, or about almost 6 cents. So we've seen, again, we actually pull this out a little bit, and you can see it's been fairly depressed. So miners right now are kind of moving to a level of stress. They're not earning as much as they used to, and on top of that, they're actually starting to sell their Bitcoin as well. If we take a look at our Bitcoin miners reserve for all the wallets, what we've seen here is that miners are actually, they've decreased their positions significantly over the past couple of days. And back in August 28th, they had about 1.8 million or so Bitcoin. And now, I say 1.8, 1,844,970, and now they're at about 1,840,000. Okay, so we've seen the number of coins available in these these miners' wallets decrease by about 5,000 or so. They've sold about 5,000, and it seems like if you overlay this with our SOPR, which gives us an idea of profitability. Right now, we're sitting at a SOPR level of 0.99, under 1. So that means that people that are selling right now are actually selling at a loss. So miners are under stress. They're not making as much money as they used to. The Bitcoin's not worth as much. They're selling, and it seems to be that they're also selling at a loss, according to SOPR, and according to what we see here for the miners reserve. So that also causes more downwards pressure for the Bitcoin price as well. Now, again, putting this all together, I also want to go ahead and overlay this with the economic report and just what's going on with the macro economy, okay? Now, what happened Friday is that we had a unemployment rate that came out, a U.S. unemployment rate that was much higher than expected. So it was at 3.8% versus the expected 3.5%. And so what we're starting to see right now is the one thing that's really been holding up the economy has been the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate has been surprisingly low. And as long as it stayed low, we weren't likely to get a recession. But now, as the unemployment rate is starting to spike up a little bit, now we're kind of in a little bit of different situation, in that we're going to wind up seeing more layoffs and more people potentially earning less as well. Okay, so that kind of leads me into my next point, which is the Fed and what's been going on with the Fed. The Fed's rhetoric has been incredibly hawkish this entire time. They've consistently said, higher for longer, we're going to keep raising rates. They seem like they're absolutely intent to crash the economy and send the U.S. into a recession. And if we go ahead and take a look at our CME FedWatch tool, which gives us an idea for the target rate for the next funding rate, for the next funding rate hike, which is going to be on the funding rate decision, which is going to be on the 20th of September. We're seeing 93% possibility that we're actually gonna stay where we are. That they're gonna pause. But if you go to November, what you're seeing here for the November meeting is they're actually at 35%. There's a 35% probability that they're gonna raise rates by another 1/4 percentage point. Okay, so this right here, again, this is kind of more what I'm talking about when I'm saying that the Fed is essentially trying to raise the economy into a recession. And hopefully that doesn't wind up coming to that. If it does, that's not going to be good for Bitcoin or crypto in general, and especially for Bitcoin, which is so sensitive to these Fed rate decisions. We could actually wind up seeing more pressure on the Bitcoin price as well in the future as the Fed continues to raise rates. And especially if people get laid off and there's an increase in unemployment, there's going to be less money being spent in the economy, and there's going to be less people who can afford to buy commodities such as Bitcoin. So that would also depress the price. But again, I want to circle back to what I talked about, and that is that I use all this as a contrarian indicator. I like to buy when sentiment's depressed. I like to buy when the price is depressed, because that's when you get the best deals. And especially considering I'm holding long term, I'm not looking at this chart and I'm saying I'm going to go ahead and sell within the next couple of days. I am going to be holding for the next couple of years. I am not worried at all about the long-term strength of Bitcoin or the long-term uptrend that's still intact to this day. If we take a look at our long-term uptrend, we can see still very much intact over all the FUD and all the price craziness that we've seen over the past couple of years. But even then, I'm not particularly concerned if we do wind up seeing a recession, or not even a deep recession, maybe even just a shallow recession. Then I do think that we'll get through it and we'll basically find a bull market on the other side. Now, I still expect 2024 to be a good year for Bitcoin, for the specific reason that we're going to get the halving, and we could potentially get a decision on the Bitcoin spot ETF approval. That's entirely possible, and I think that would be bullish catalyst for Bitcoin to rally higher. But in the near term, we're going to wind up facing some serious economic challenges, as well as continued depression on the Bitcoin price, and we could wind up seeing the price move even lower. But let me know what you guys think below. Leave a comment. Tell me what you guys are going to be doing with the Bitcoin and what your strategy is going to be to weather this storm. And I will catch you guys in the next video.